The autumn sun rose slowly over the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the morning dew. Main Street was quiet at this hour, with only a few pickup trucks rolling past the old brick buildings that had stood there for generations. The air carried that particular crispness of October mornings, when summer's warmth finally surrenders to the approaching winter. Sarah Mitchell pushed through the back door of Rosie's diner, her breath forming small clouds in the cool air. At 27 years old, she had the kind of face that showed every emotion, blue-gray eyes that crinkled when she smiled, despite the dark circles beneath them, and an expression that made strangers feel comfortable enough to share their troubles. Her chestnut brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore the same uniform she had worn for 4 years, a pale blue dress with roses embroidered on the pocket, covered by a white apron that had seen far better days. She had barely slept 3 hours last night, lying awake in her tiny studio apartment, listening to her brother Daniel shifting restlessly in his wheelchair, wondering how she would pay for his surgery, wondering how much longer she could keep going like this. The morning passed in its familiar rhythm, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the griddle, the comfortable murmur of conversation, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee. This was Millbrook, predictable, safe, unchanging. Sarah had grown up here, and while part of her had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, of escaping to something more, that dream had died with her mother 4 years ago, buried under medical bills and responsibilities she never asked for. By mid-morning, the rush had slowed to a trickle. Maggie went on her break, and Sarah took the opportunity to handle the trash, one of the less glamorous parts of the job. She grabbed 3 heavy bags from the kitchen and pushed through the back door into the alley behind the diner. The alley was nothing to look at. Cracked asphalt, a rusted dumpster, the brick walls of the diner on one side, and the old pharmacy on the other. A few weeds pushed through the pavement cracks. Stubborn and determined, the October breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves from the maple trees that lined Main Street. Sarah hoisted the first bag into the dumpster, then the second. As she lifted the third, she heard something. A small sound, like a whimper or a stifled cough. She froze, listening. There it was again, she called out, her voice uncertain, asking if someone was there. Silence. Then, from behind the dumpster came the unmistakable sound of rapid breathing, someone trying very hard to be quiet and failing. Sarah's heart quickened. She set down the trash bag carefully and moved around the dumpster, not sure what to expect. A stray dog? Maybe a raccoon? But the breathing sounded human, and that worried her more. She spoke softly, the way you would speak to a frightened animal, saying she would not hurt anyone, asking if they were okay. She peered around the dumpster's edge and her breath caught. A little girl sat huddled against the brick wall, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them. She could not have been more than 8 years old. Her clothes, dark pants, and what had once been an expensive white blouse, were filthy, covered in dirt and grass stains. Her face was smudged with grime, her long black hair tangled and disheveled, but it was her eyes that caught Sarah's attention, large, dark, and filled with such fear that it made her chest ache. Sarah whispered, instinctively dropping to a crouch a few feet away, making herself less threatening, asking what the little girl was doing out here. The girl said nothing, just stared at her with those huge, terrified eyes. Sarah's mind raced. A child alone, dirty, hiding behind a dumpster. Nothing about this was right. Her first instinct was to call someone, the authorities, anyone, but something in the girl's expression stopped her. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to bolt if Sarah made the wrong move. She asked gently if the girl was hungry. The child's eyes flickered, just for a moment, toward the diner's back door. That tiny movement told Sarah everything she needed to know. She told the girl to wait here, standing slowly, saying she would get her something to eat. She expected her to run, but the girl did not move. As Sarah backed toward the door, keeping the child in sight, she noticed details that did not quite fit. Despite the dirt, the girl's clothes looked expensive, well made. There was a silver bracelet on her small wrist, delicate and clearly valuable, and her shoes, though scuffed and dirty, were patent leather, the kind Sarah could never afford even on her best day. Who was this child, and what was she running from? Sarah did not know it yet, but the moment she decided to help this little girl, she had just stepped into a world she never knew existed, a world of power, danger, and secrets that would change her life forever. If you want to know what happens next, hit that like button, share this story with someone who loves a good mystery, and subscribe so you do not miss a single chapter, because in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, The price of kindness is about to be revealed. Sarah pushed open the back door and stepped into the kitchen, her heart pounding out of rhythm, and her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady herself. She glanced around quickly. Maggie had not yet returned from her break. The diner was quiet, and no one was paying attention to her. Sarah swiftly took a clean plate from the shelf and arranged on it 2 pancakes that were still hot from an order that had just been canceled. Added a serving of soft golden scrambled eggs, 3 crisp strips of bacon, and a handful of fresh fruit from the refrigerator. She poured a glass of warm milk, hesitated for a second, then reached for a few cookies that Mrs. Thompson had brought in as a gift to the diner that morning. Her hand paused when she noticed the gray sweater Maggie had given her earlier, the one she had planned to wear against the cold but had taken off once the kitchen heated up. She thought of the small, shivering shoulders of the little girl outside, and without another moment of hesitation, she folded the sweater and laid it over her arm along with the tray of food. She took a clean towel, dipped it into warm water, and wrung it dry. Everything took less than 2 minutes, yet to Sarah it felt as though an entire hour had passed. She pushed the back door open and stepped outside, her chest tightening with the fear that the child might have run away. But no, the girl was still there, still curled up behind the trash bin, her dark eyes lifting to Sarah with a mixture of fear and hope unlike anything Sarah had ever seen in a child. Sarah approached slowly, one careful step at a time, as if she were nearing a wounded baby bird. She lowered herself to the ground about a meter away, placed the tray of food on the pavement between them, did not slide it closer, did not force it on her, simply left it there as a silent invitation. The girl looked at the food, then at Sarah, then back at the food. Those wide eyes blinked rapidly, and Sarah could see the battle raging inside the child, between the gnawing hunger and the fear of a stranger. Sarah said nothing. She just sat there, silent and patient, letting the calm of her presence speak in place of words. At last, hunger won. The girl crawled closer, inch by inch, her eyes never leaving Sarah, as if afraid she might disappear or, worse, suddenly harm her. When the small fingers touched the first strip of bacon, Sarah had to turn her face away for a moment to hide the tears rising in her eyes. The child ate as if she had not eaten for days, stuffing the food into her mouth in frantic bites, barely chewing, as though afraid the meal would be taken away at any second. Sarah had seen that kind of hunger before, in the mirror, in the days after her mother died, and the money ran out. When she gave her share of food to Daniel, and lied that she had already eaten at the diner, she understood that hunger, that desperation, and her heart broke for this child. When the girl began to slow down, Sarah gently offered the warm towel. The child looked at the cloth, then at Sarah, confused. Sarah slowly lifted her hand and touched her own cheek, showing her. The girl understood, took the towel, and wiped her face, the grime fading away to reveal smooth, pale skin beneath, and the faint pink flush of a child who had once been well cared for. Sarah handed her the sweater, and when the girl put it on, it hung loosely over her small frame, nearly swallowing her whole. Yet the child clutched it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. A little while later, when most of the food was gone and the glass of milk was only half full, Sarah started to rise, needing to return inside before anyone noticed she had been gone too long. But the moment she shifted, a small hand suddenly reached out and grasped her wrist. Sarah looked down, and what she saw rooted her in place. The girl's eyes were fixed on her, no longer filled with fear, but with pleading, with desperation, as if begging her not to go, not to leave her alone. Sarah sat back down, and she saw those small shoulders slowly relax, as though the child had finally released a breath she had been holding for far too long. Sarah spoke softly, telling her she was not going anywhere, that she promised she would come back, that she only needed to step inside for a moment and would return right away. The girl studied her for a long time, as if weighing whether this promise could be trusted, and then, finally, she nodded. It was the first response, the first sign of trust, and to Sarah, it was more precious than anything she had ever been given. Sarah returned to the alley whenever she had the chance, stealing brief moments during short breaks between waves of customers to sit beside the little girl. She brought more water, more bread, and anything else she could manage to take without being noticed. And gradually, little by little, the child began to change. Her shoulders were no longer as rigid as before. Her eyes no longer looked at Sarah with overwhelming fear, but instead held the cautious curiosity of a child trying to understand the adult in front of her. Sarah did not ask much, did not push. She simply sat there, sometimes talking about small things from the diner, about forgetful old Mr. Harrison who was always losing his wallet, about the Parker children spilling milk all over the table, about Maggie with her sharp tongue and a heart as soft as butter. She spoke as if she were talking to herself, not expecting a reply, merely filling the silence with gentle sounds. Then, sometime in the early afternoon, when the autumn sunlight softened and the alley slipped into a stretch of cool shade, the girl suddenly spoke. Her voice was hoarse from not having been used for a long time, so quiet that Sarah had to lean closer to hear her. "Lily," the girl said. "My name is Lily." Sarah felt something bloom inside her chest, warm and painful all at once. She smiled and told her it was a beautiful name, that she was glad to know it. Lily looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether to say more, then continued, each word emerging slowly like water seeping through stone. "I went very far. I walked all night. My feet hurt a lot." Sarah asked gently where Lily had come from, whether anyone had been with her. The girl shook her head, her tangled black hair shifting with the motion. "I went alone. I slipped out when everyone was sleeping." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. An 8-year-old child crossing the night alone, walking until her feet hurt, just to escape from home. What could have driven her to do that? She asked about family, about parents, keeping her voice carefully neutral so as not to frighten her. Lily was silent for a long time, her eyes lowered to her small fingers twisting the hem of the sweater. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. "Papa will be very angry. Papa will be very angry when he knows I ran away." But then she looked up, and in her eyes Sarah saw something more painful than fear. It was hurt. "But Papa does not care. Papa does not talk to me. Papa only works. Papa is never home." Sarah asked about her mother, and instantly wished she had not. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her lips pressed together as if holding back a sob. "Mama is gone. Mama got sick and went to sleep forever. Mama is not coming back." Sarah said nothing. She simply sat there, letting her silence say that she understood, that she truly understood what it meant to lose a mother. Lily kept talking, as if once she had started she could not stop. Words held back for far too long now, spilling out like a broken dam. "Since Mama left, Papa changed. Papa does not hug me anymore. Papa does not read stories to me anymore. I stay in the house with Uncle Vince and other people, but no one plays with me. The house is very big, but I am not allowed to go outside. Someone follows me all the time. I do not have any friends." Sarah listened, and with every sentence, pieces began to fall into place in her mind, forming a picture she was not sure she wanted to see. The big house, being followed constantly, not allowed outside, Uncle Vince, those details, combined with the expensive clothes, the delicate silver bracelet, the polished leather shoes, all pointed toward something Sarah did not dare to think about. She asked, keeping her voice steady, what her papa did for work. Lily tilted her head, as if the question had never crossed her mind before. "I do not know. But many people work for Papa. Everyone listens to Papa." And then she added one more sentence, in the innocent voice of a child who did not fully understand the meaning of her own words. Yet the sentence made the blood in Sarah's veins turn cold. "Bad people are afraid of Papa. Everyone is afraid of Papa." Sarah looked at the girl, at those clear eyes without a trace of deceit, and she knew she had just stepped into something far bigger than anything she could have imagined. Sarah was sitting with Lily, trying to process what the child had just told her, when the sudden crash of the back door opening made them both flinch. Maggie stood there, eyes wide with shock, one hand still holding the apron she had been about to change into. She froze for 1 second, then another, and her gaze shifted from Sarah to the little girl shrinking behind the young woman's back, and Sarah could see the exact moment when understanding dawned on Maggie's face. She stepped forward, her voice controlled but threaded with worry, and demanded that Sarah Mitchell explain immediately what was going on. Sarah stood up, instinctively moving one hand behind her as if to shield Lily, and began to tell everything. She spoke of the noise behind the trash bin, of the frightened eyes, of the meal, of the scattered fragments of information the child had shared. Maggie listened, her face growing paler with every sentence. When Sarah finished, Maggie looked at her as if she had just announced she planned to jump off a cliff. "Did you have any idea what you are doing?" Maggie asked, telling her this was a lost child, possibly an abducted child, possibly the child of someone dangerous, and asking if she truly thought it was reasonable to hide her behind a diner like a stray cat. Sarah knew Maggie was right. She knew the proper thing to do was to call the police, to call the authorities, and let people with power handle it. But the moment the word police was spoken, Lily began to tremble behind her, small hands clutching the hem of Sarah's shirt as the child whispered in a voice thick with terror that she did not want that, begged her not to call anyone, promised she would be good and pleaded not to be sent back. Sarah turned around, and what she saw squeezed the breath from her chest. Lily was crying, not the loud crying of a child seeking attention, but the silent crying of a child accustomed to not being heard, tears streaming down her cheeks without a single sob, as if she had learned long ago that crying out loud did no good. Sarah knelt down and wrapped her arms around Lily, and the child clung to her as though Sarah were the only lifeline left in a vast ocean. Maggie stood watching the scene, and Sarah could see the battle unfolding in her eyes. On one side was reason, rules, safety. On the other was the trembling child, the raw fear in her eyes, and the instinct of a woman who had raised 4 children and 11 grandchildren. At last, Maggie let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She looked at Sarah, then at Lily, then back at Sarah, her voice dropping. "Do you know what you are getting tangled up in?" she asked. "Children dressed like this, with watches and bracelets like those, do not come from ordinary families. Do you know that in big cities, there are families whose names alone are enough to make people tremble? Mafia, Sarah. Organized crime. The kind of people who will make sure you do not live long enough to regret touching their children." Sarah knew it. She understood everything Maggie was saying, but she also looked down at the child clinging to her, a child who had lost her mother, been neglected by her father, and grown so lonely that she had run away just to be noticed by someone. She asked Maggie for a little more time, just until evening, to learn more, to think of a way to handle this without hurting the child even further. Maggie studied her for a long time, then shook her head, not in refusal, but in disbelief that she was agreeing to something so reckless. "Until evening," she said firmly. "If by evening you do not have an answer, I will call the police myself. Do you understand?" She turned away, but before stepping inside, she stopped and added one last sentence without looking back. "You have a good heart, Sarah. I only hope it does not put you in an early grave." More than 50 miles to the east, in a mansion hidden behind rows of ancient oak trees in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Dominic Salvatore was sitting in his study when the door flew open without a knock. There was only one person in the world who dared to do that, and when Dominic looked up and saw the face of Vincent Marchetti, the man who had stood beside him for 20 years, he knew immediately that something was wrong. Vince never lost his composure. He was the rock in the storm, the man Dominic trusted more than himself, yet now, in the eyes of the 45-year-old man, there was something Dominic had never seen before: fear. Vince spoke, his voice hoarse as if he had just run a marathon. "Boss, Lily, the girl is missing." Dominic did not react at once. He sat there, motionless, as if the words had been spoken in a language he did not understand. Then slowly, very slowly, he set his pen down on the desk, the movement so careful it was unsettling, and when he looked up, his dark eyes were cold as ice. "Say that again," Vince swallowed, something Dominic had never seen him do in front of anyone. "The nanny found the girl's room empty this morning. The bed was neatly made, but Lily was gone. We searched the entire house, the entire grounds. She was nowhere. The security cameras show her climbing through a gap in the back fence at around 2 a.m. yesterday." Dominic stood up, and Vince instinctively stepped back, not because Dominic shouted or smashed anything, but because he did nothing at all. The silence of Dominic Salvatore was more terrifying than anyone else's rage. He walked to the window, staring out at the vast garden beyond, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, and Vince could see his knuckles white from the force of his grip. "It has been more than 24 hours, Dominic said, his voice low and dangerous, like the growl of a predator. "My daughter has been missing for more than 24 hours, and I am only being told now." Vince tried to explain that at first they thought she was hiding somewhere in the house, that they had searched everywhere before daring to inform him that they did not want to worry him unnecessarily. But Dominic was not listening, or rather, he heard but did not care. His mind was racing at a brutal pace, analyzing every possibility, every risk, every enemy who might have had a hand in this. He turned back to face Vince and began issuing orders in a voice that allowed no argument. "Mobilize everyone. Everyone. Our people in New York, in Jersey, in Boston. Call them all back here. Check every security camera on every road leading out of this area. Contact our people in the police department, but do not file an official report. I do not want the FBI involved. Find out if any of the other families are making moves. And Vince, if someone has taken my daughter, I want to know who it is before the sun goes down." Vince nodded, and turned to leave, but Dominic called him back. One more thing. Find out why she ran away. What happened? Who did what? What I do not know. Find everything. When Vince left, Dominic stood alone in the vast room, the silence wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. He was Dominic Salvatore, the man who made the entire East Coast underworld tremble, the man who controlled an empire worth billions of dollars, the man whose single nod could decide life or death. But in that moment, standing in his study, he was only a father terrified to his bones. He glanced toward the corner of the room, where a small photograph lay hidden behind a stack of documents, a picture of Elena holding Lily when she was just born, and he whispered a promise no one else could hear. I will find you. Even if I have to turn this entire world upside down, I will find you. And if anyone has dared to touch my daughter, they will wish they had never been born. After Vince left, Dominic did not return to his desk. Instead, he walked to the corner of the room, where the small photograph still lay hidden behind a stack of documents, like a secret he never wanted anyone to know. He picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed over the face of the woman in the picture. The woman with glossy black hair and warm honey-brown eyes under the sunlight. The woman holding a newborn baby with the brightest smile Dominic had ever seen in his life. Elena. 3 years had passed since the day she died. Yet for Dominic, the pain was still as raw as if it had happened yesterday. He remembered that morning, an ordinary morning like so many others, when Elena had been standing in the kitchen making coffee for him, smiling as she said that Lily wanted her father to read her a story that night. He remembered nodding absently, his eyes still fixed on his phone, giving a promise he was not sure he would keep. Then that afternoon, the call came. Elena collapsed in the kitchen, her heart stopping without warning, the congenital heart condition she had hidden for so many years finally taking her away, swift and merciless, giving him no chance to say goodbye, no chance to tell her that she was the only light in his dark life. Dominic sank into the armchair by the window, the photograph still in his hand, and let the memories consume him. Elena was the only person who had ever seen the real man beneath everything else, not the feared Mafia boss, not the cold-blooded figure the underworld trembled before, but simply Dominic, an ordinary man with fears and weaknesses he never dared admit to anyone else. She had taught him how to love, had shown him that even in a world steeped in violence there was still room for gentleness, and when she died, she took all of that with her. Dominic did not know how to be a father without Elena. He looked at Lily and saw Elena in the child's eyes, in her smile, in the way she tilted her head when she thought, and each time, his heart was torn open all over again. The pain was too much for him to bear, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He withdrew. He buried himself in work, in endless meetings, in decisions of life and death, because at least in that world he knew what he was doing. With Lily, he did not. He did not know how to hold his daughter without thinking of Elena. He did not know how to speak to her without hearing Elena's voice echoing in his mind. So he stayed silent. He kept his distance. He let others care for his daughter because he believed that was how he could protect her from his pain, from the dangerous world he lived in. But there was another reason, one he did not dare admit even to himself. He was afraid. Dominic Salvatore, a man who feared nothing in this world, was afraid to love his own daughter. In his world, love was a fatal weakness. His enemies were always searching for what he valued most, and Elena had once been a target. She had been threatened, followed, forced to live in fear, simply because she loved him. Dominic had sworn to himself that he would never let that happen to Lily. If he kept his distance, if he did not show his love too openly, perhaps his enemies would not realize how much Lily meant to him. Perhaps she would be safer. But now, sitting alone in the empty room with the photograph of his late wife in his hand, Dominic realized just how terribly wrong he had been. He had tried to protect his daughter by staying away from her, and instead he had pushed her so far into loneliness that she ran away into the night just to escape it. He had wanted to keep her safe, yet he had been the one who caused her pain. He looked down at the photograph once more, gazing into Elena's eyes as if searching for forgiveness. "I failed," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotions he had suppressed for far too long. "I failed our child. Please forgive me." Outside the window, the sun was setting, staining the sky a fiery orange-red, and Dominic Salvatore, the head of the most powerful criminal empire on the East Coast, sat alone as darkness slowly crept in, silent tears sliding down a face hardened by years of blood and shadow. The Salvatore Empire began to move like a colossal machine suddenly awakened from sleep, and within 1 hour of Dominic giving the order, more than 50 men were mobilized, stretching from Philadelphia to New York, From Atlantic City to Baltimore, all receiving the same message: find the girl at any cost and report immediately any lead, no matter how small. Vince stood in a room that had been turned into a temporary command center, 3 laptops open at once, phones ringing non-stop, a wall covered with maps marked in red lines tracing possible routes. His people inside the police department quietly accessed traffic camera systems, searching for any image of an 8-year-old girl with black hair traveling alone through the night. Then, around 7 in the evening, the first lead finally surfaced. One of Vince's men discovered footage from a bus station camera about 3 miles from the mansion, capturing a small girl with long black hair climbing onto a night bus at 3:15 in the morning. The image was grainy and the angle poor, but Vince immediately recognized the white blouse and polished leather shoes Lily often wore. His chest tightened as he watched her small figure climb the tall steps alone in the cold darkness. He immediately traced the route of that bus, a long line running west from the suburbs of Philadelphia, cutting through small towns scattered across Pennsylvania. They checked cameras at every stop, questioned drivers through quiet connections, and little by little the picture sharpened. Lily had gotten off at a stop roughly 20 miles west of Philadelphia, near a small town that almost none of them had ever heard of, Millbrook. Vince went to report to Dominic, who had not left his study since the news arrived. The boss stood up at once, his eyes showing the first flicker of light since morning. "Prepare the car," Dominic ordered, his voice allowing no argument. "I am going myself." Vince hesitated for a second, ready to say that the boss should not go, that letting others handle it would be safer. But when he looked into Dominic's eyes, he knew any protest was pointless. This was no longer about a mafia boss. This was about a father searching for his child. 3 black SUVs tore into the night, tires grinding against asphalt, headlights ripping through the darkness ahead. Dominic sat in the back seat of the lead vehicle, silent as stone, his gaze fixed forward without truly seeing anything. In his mind, there was only one thought: find Lily, bring her home. And this time he would not repeat the same mistake. This time he would be the father his daughter deserved. The vehicles raced down the highway toward the small town of Millbrook, a place where no one knew that their quiet lives were about to be completely overturned. Inside Rosie's diner, Sarah sat beside Lily, completely unaware that a storm was approaching, that black cars were cutting through the night toward her at frightening speed, that within just a few hours, she would come face to face with the most terrifying man she had ever encountered in her life. While the black SUVs were racing toward Millbrook, Sarah sat in the small staff break room behind the diner, watching Lily sleep on the worn old sofa. The child curled into herself like a kitten, Sarah's gray sweater wrapped around her tiny body, her face finally peaceful after a long day filled with fear. Sarah leaned back against the wall, her eyes on the sleeping girl, while her mind drifted to thoughts she had tried to bury for far too long. She thought about the shabby studio apartment waiting for her at home, where the electricity had been shut off 3 days ago because she could not afford the bill. She thought about Daniel, her younger brother, 22 years old, sitting in the darkness of that apartment in the wheelchair she had taken out a high-interest loan to buy. 2 years ago, Daniel had been a promising swimmer, with a college scholarship and a wide-open future ahead of him. And then there had been a rainy night, a drunk driver, and everything had changed forever. Daniel survived, but his spine was badly damaged, and the legs that once carried him effortlessly through the water no longer felt anything at all. The doctors said there was a surgery that could help him walk again, an advanced neurological procedure at a hospital in Philadelphia, but the cost was $200,000, a number that to Sarah might as well have been the stars beyond her reach. Sarah worked 3 jobs just to survive: morning shifts as a waitress at Rosie's diner, afternoon shifts as a cashier at Mr. Miller's grocery store, and night shifts cleaning offices at the town's administrative building. She slept an average of 3 hours a night, sometimes less, and her meals were usually leftovers from the diner or discounted bread bought at the end of the day. She gave the proper meals to Daniel, lying that she had already eaten at work, and he believed her because he wanted to believe, because admitting the truth would mean admitting that he had become a burden to his sister. Sarah's phone vibrated, and she looked at the screen with a heavy heart. A message from the landlord, short and cold as always, reminding her that she was 2 months behind on rent and that the deadline was this Friday: pay up or move out. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling as though someone were tightening a grip around her chest. She had no idea how she was going to manage. $3,000 in rent, $400 for Daniel's medication this month, $15,000 still unpaid from her mother's old hospital bills, not to mention overdue utilities, food, gas money for the old car that had broken down last month and that she could not afford to fix. She had sold everything she could, her only coat, the ring her mother had left her, even the medical textbooks from the time she still dreamed of becoming a nurse. That dream had died 4 years ago, when her mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and Sarah dropped out of school to care for her. She had completed 1 year in the nursing program, a short year she still remembered as a beautiful dream, before reality dragged her back down to earth. Her mother passed away after 6 months of fighting, leaving Sarah with a mountain of debt and a shattered heart. And then, just when Sarah thought things could not possibly get worse, Daniel's accident happened. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at Lily sleeping, and a fleeting thought crossed her mind. She could barely take care of herself and her brother, so why was she getting involved in this? Why was she adding another burden to shoulders that had been bowed for so long? But then Lily shifted in her sleep, her face tightening as if caught in a nightmare, and a whisper slipped from her small lips. "Mama, do not go. Please, Mama, do not go." Sarah felt her heart break all over again, not from her own pain, but from the pain of the child in front of her. She thought of herself at 8 years old, when her father left and never came back, of the feeling of being abandoned and unwanted, of the nights she cried alone in the dark, wondering what she had done wrong. She understood Lily's pain, her loneliness, the feeling of having a father who was there in name only, a shadow passing through her life. Sarah reached out and gently stroked Lily's black hair, and the child slowly calmed, her breathing evening out. Sarah knew she was stepping into trouble. Maggie had warned her, but looking at the sleeping child, she knew something else as well. She could not abandon Lily. No matter what happened, no matter the cost, she would not turn her back on a child who needed help. Lily woke up about an hour later, her dark eyes opening and immediately searching for Sarah, as if afraid she had gone away. And when she saw that Sarah was still there, sitting right beside her, she let out a small breath of relief, and something miraculous happened. For the first time since they had met, Lily smiled. It was not the bright, carefree smile of a child untouched by pain, only a slight curve at the corner of her lips. Yet to Sarah it was more precious than any treasure in the world. Sarah asked if she was hungry. Lily shook her head, then suddenly sat up and moved closer to Sarah, so close that their shoulders nearly touched. She sat in silence for a moment, as if gathering courage, and then she began to speak. This time it was not broken fragments like before, but a steady flow, as if a dam had burst, and everything held back for so long had finally found a way out. Lily talked about her mama, about the woman she called the most beautiful angel in the world. "Mama had long black hair like mine," Lily said, her voice soft and full of love. "Mama used to sit and brush my hair every morning and sing songs in Italian. Mama said it was the language of love. Mama made the best cookies in the world, and always saved the ones with the most chocolate just for me. Mama read stories to me every night, and Mama always held me when I was scared of the dark." Sarah listened without interrupting, letting the child pour out the memories she clung to like a lifeline. Lily spoke of afternoons in the garden when Mama taught her the names of flowers, of evenings when the whole family ate together, and Papa laughed, really laughed, not the cold smile he had now. "Then Mama got sick," Lily said, her voice beginning to tremble. "I did not understand then. They said Mama needed to rest more. Then one day Mama did not wake up. They said Mama went to sleep forever. I do not understand how someone can sleep forever and never wake up." Tears began to roll down Lily's cheeks, but she did not stop, as if she had to say everything, as if she needed someone to hear her. After Mama went away, Papa changed. Papa did not smile anymore. Papa did not eat dinner with me anymore. Papa stayed in his office or went on trips. Whenever I wanted to see Papa, Uncle Vince said Papa was busy. I tried to be very good. I studied hard. I did not cry loudly so Papa would not be bothered, but Papa still did not look at me. I thought maybe Papa hated me because I looked too much like Mama. I thought maybe Papa wished I had gone with Mama so he would not have to see me anymore. Sarah felt her heart being crushed by those words. She pulled Lily into her arms, held her tightly, and told her that was not true, that Papa loved her, that sometimes grown-ups simply did not know how to show their love. But deep inside, Sarah wondered whether she was lying, whether any father could truly let his daughter become so lonely that she ran away into the night. Lily went on to describe life inside the big house, the vast rooms she was not allowed to enter, the guards everywhere who never spoke to her, the meals eaten alone in her room with only the old nanny watching her, the nights she cried in a bed too large for her small body and called for Mama with no answer. "I have no friends," Lily said, her sadness so deep it made Sarah want to cry with her. "I do not go to school like other children. A teacher comes to the house, but they teach and then they leave. No one plays with me. I only have the teddy bear Mama gave me, but the teddy bear cannot talk." Sarah gently asked why she had run away, and Lily's answer cut her to the bone. "I wanted to know if Papa still cared about me. I thought if I disappeared, maybe Papa would come looking for me. Maybe Papa would remember that I am still here. I just wanted Papa to look for me, Sarah. I just wanted Papa to love me the way he loved me when Mama was still alive." Sarah held her even tighter, tears streaming down her own face without bothering to wipe them away. She told Lily that Papa surely loved her, that Papa would surely come looking for her, that everything would be all right. And as she spoke those words, Sarah prayed silently that they were true, that the distant father still had a heart, that he would come and that he would change before it was too late. Late afternoon settled over Millbrook, the weak autumn sunlight tinting the windows of Rosie's diner a soft gold, the flow of customers thinning until only a few remained, scattered with their coffee and newspapers, the air as calm as any other afternoon in this small town. Sarah stood behind the counter, her eyes drifting again and again toward the staff room where Lily was, her hands wiping the same glass over and over, though it had been spotless for a long time. She could not focus on anything, her thoughts spinning with everything Lily had shared and with Maggie's warnings. Then she glanced out the window, and her heart seemed to miss a beat. 2 sleek black SUVs were moving slowly along the main street, unnaturally slow, as if searching for something. These were not the kinds of vehicles one usually saw in Millbrook, where pickup trucks and aging sedans were the norm. These cars belonged to another world, a world of money, power, and dark secrets. Sarah watched them, trying to convince herself it was just a coincidence, that perhaps they were lost tourists or passing businessmen. But when one of the vehicles stopped near the diner, her instincts screamed that this had something to do with Lily. She set the glass down, her hands trembling, and forced herself to appear calm as a man stepped out of the car. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his stride carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to power. He entered the diner, sharp eyes sweeping the room as if assessing everything in seconds. He did not order anything, merely took a seat near the door and watched. Sarah felt his gaze settle on her, cold and appraising, then shift to the small gray sweater draped over the back of a chair near the counter, the sweater Lily had worn and left behind when she went into the back. Sarah tried to steady herself, continuing to wipe the counter as if nothing were wrong, but her hands shook so badly she nearly knocked over the salt shaker. The man answered a phone call, murmured something in a low voice Sarah could not hear, his eyes never leaving her. Then he stood, gave her a slight nod that felt like a mocking greeting, and walked back out. Through the window, Sarah saw him speak to someone in the other SUV, and then both vehicles rolled away slowly. But she knew they were not really gone. They were waiting, watching, closing in. Her heart raced as she understood what she was facing. This was not the police, not social services. This was Lily's family, the people Lily had said everyone was afraid of. Sarah rushed into the staff room where Lily was sitting and scribbling on a piece of paper Maggie had given her, pulled the child into her arms, and tried to keep her voice steady as she said everything would be fine, though her body would not stop trembling. Lily looked up at her, big dark eyes filled with worry. "They are here, aren't they?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. "Papa's people are here." Sarah did not know how to answer. She only held Lily tighter, looked toward the window where afternoon shadows were giving way to dusk, and waited for what could not be avoided. Knowing the storm was coming, and not knowing how devastating it would be, less than 30 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of Rosie's diner, their engines roaring and then falling silent almost at the same time, and Sarah stood behind the counter looking through the glass, knowing the moment had arrived. The car doors opened, and one by one they stepped out, 6 men in black suits in total, all tall, all radiating a danger that did not bother to hide itself. They spread out to either side, standing guard like statues, and then the door of the middle vehicle opened. The man who stepped out of that car was different from all the others. He was around 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, his solid frame carved as if from stone. His black hair was lightly touched with gray at the temples, his angular face sharp as a blade, a faint scar running along the left side of his jaw. But it was his eyes that were most striking, black as tar, cold as an endless winter, and when those eyes turned toward the diner, Sarah felt as if the temperature in the room had dropped by 10 degrees. He walked with the confidence of a man accustomed to the world bowing before him, each step measured and unhurried, as if time itself waited for him. The diner door swung open and he stepped inside, bringing with him a deadly silence. Everyone in the room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hung suspended in the air. Even the music from the old radio seemed to fade. This is the power of presence, Sarah realized. He did not need to say a word to make the entire room tremble. Those black eyes swept slowly across the diner, assessing, and then stopped on Sarah. She felt as if she were being seen straight through, as though every secret, every fear, every weakness she possessed was laid bare under that gaze. He approached, one step at a time, and Sarah forced herself to stay where she was, forced her legs not to retreat even as every instinct screamed at her to run. He stopped at the counter, directly in front of her, and when he spoke, his voice was low and deep like distant thunder, heavy with authority and danger. "Where is my daughter?" It was not a question. It was a command. Sarah swallowed, her throat dry, but she did not look away. She knew this was the man Lily had spoken of, the father everyone feared, the head of an empire she could scarcely imagine, but she also remembered Lily's tear-filled eyes when the child said her papa no longer loved her, remembered the crying in the night, remembered the desperate loneliness of an 8-year-old girl, and that gave her the strength to stand her ground. "She is inside," Sarah said, surprised that her voice was steadier than she expected. "She is sleeping, and she is terrified." Something flickered in those black eyes, too fast for Sarah to tell whether it was anger or pain, and then it vanished. He tilted his head slightly, as if reassessing her, as if unaccustomed to anyone speaking to him this way. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice still cold as ice. "And what do you think you are doing keeping my daughter here?" Sarah heard Maggie gasp somewhere behind her, heard chairs scraping as customers hurried to leave, but she did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the man in front of her, the man she knew could destroy her life with a single nod. "I am the one who found her curled up behind the trash bins early this morning," Sarah said. "I am the one who fed her when she was starving. I am the one who sat with her when she cried for her mother. And you," she paused, knowing she was walking a razor-thin line yet unable to stop. "You are the father she ran away from in the middle of the night just to see if you still cared." The air in the diner seemed to freeze solid. Dominic's men stared at Sarah as if she had grown another head. Maggie covered her mouth in horror, and even Vince, who had followed Dominic for 20 years, widened his eyes in shock. No one, not a single person in the world, spoke to Dominic Salvatore like that. Dominic stood perfectly still, his dark eyes fixed on Sarah without blinking. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds passed in suffocating silence. Then he took one step closer, and Sarah did not move back. They faced each other, less than an arm's length apart, and in the icy eyes of the most powerful man on the east coast of the United States, Sarah saw something few had ever witnessed. Beneath the coldness, beneath the cruelty, there was something else. A tremor, the shadow of fear. The fear of a father who had almost lost his child. Dominic looked at Sarah with narrowed eyes, the flash of surprise fading quickly into his familiar coldness, and he spoke in a low, dangerous voice, daring her to tell him how to raise his daughter, saying she knew nothing about him, nothing about his family, nothing about their life. Sarah knew she should stop, knew she was playing with fire, knew the man in front of her could make her disappear from the face of the earth without anyone ever finding her body. But the image of Lily curled up behind the trash bin burned in her mind, the sound of the child crying in her sleep calling for her mama, the desperate look when Lily said her papa wished she had gone with her mother, and Sarah realized she could not stay silent, not because she was brave, but because she had once been an abandoned child herself, because she knew what it felt like when a father walked away and never came back. "You are right," Sarah replied, her voice trembling but not breaking. "I do not know anything about you. I do not know who you are. I do not care how much money or power you have, but I know your daughter. I know she walked all night in the cold because she could not endure her loneliness for one more day. I know she believes her father no longer loves her. I know she thinks you wish she had died with her mother." Dominic looked as if he had been struck by a brutal blow, his face hardening, his jaw clenching so tightly Sarah could see the muscles twitch beneath his skin, his hands curling into fists, and he forced out the words through his teeth that it was a lie, that Lily would never think such a thing. "That is what she told me," Sarah answered without flinching. "She said that since her mother died you never hugged her again, never read her stories again, never ate dinner with her again. She said you only worked, that every time she wanted to see you there was always something more important. She did not run away because she hated you or wanted to hurt you. She ran away because it was the only way she could think of to find out whether you still cared." Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between Dominic and the doorway leading to the staff room, as if her slight body could stop him if he chose to pass, and she repeated that she did not know who he was, her voice softer now, no longer defiant but touched with compassion, saying she did not know what he had endured losing his wife or how deep his pain ran, but the child inside had lost her mother too, and instead of having her father beside her to survive that grief, she had been left to face it alone, that Lily was 8 years old, and already convinced her father no longer loved her. Dominic stood there in silence, and Sarah could see something breaking behind those icy eyes, her words slicing through the armor he had built over the past 3 years, exposing a wound he thought had healed, but was still raw and festering. He looked at her as if she were a creature from another world, someone who dared to stand before him and speak the truths no one else ever would, while Vince and the others remained frozen, uncertain how to react, never having witnessed their boss cornered by a small-town waitress like this. Sarah continued, her voice now completely calm, telling him she would not stop him from taking his daughter home, that Lily was his child and she had no right to keep her, but before he walked through that door she wanted him to know one thing, that the child did not need a big house, did not need expensive clothes, did not need guards following her everywhere, that the child needed a father, not a shadow, not a stranger living under the same roof, but a real father, and if he could not give her that, then no matter how rich or powerful he was, he had already failed. Her words still hung thick in the air when a cry broke out from behind them and everyone turned, and there stood Lily in the doorway of the staff room, dark eyes flooded with tears as she looked at her father, her small face carrying a fragile mix of fear, hope, and deep aching pain. Lily stood there, small and trembling inside the oversized gray sweater, her dark eyes wet with tears as they looked toward the man she called her father. And Dominic turned, and the moment his gaze met his daughter's, something inside him shattered. He took a step forward, instinctively, driven by the desperate longing of a father who wanted to pull his child into his arms after days of terror, but Lily did not run to him the way other children would run to their fathers. Instead, she stepped back, shrank into herself, and clutched the hem of Sarah's shirt beside her. That single movement struck Dominic like a blade driven straight through his heart, sharp and merciless, because it said everything words could not. His daughter was afraid of him. His daughter was seeking safety from a stranger, instead of from her own father. "Lily," Dominic called, his voice for the first time stripped of its familiar coldness, replaced by an uncertainty he did not know how to hide. "My daughter, come here with Papa." But Lily did not move. She stood there as tears began to spill down her small cheeks, and then she spoke, the words pouring out like a broken dam, carrying with them all the pain she had held inside for 3 long years. "Papa does not love me anymore." Her voice shook, yet every word rang clearly in the deadly silence of the diner. "Since Mama went away, Papa does not love me anymore. Papa never talks to me. Papa never hugs me. Papa never reads stories to me the way Papa used to. I wait for Papa every night, but Papa never comes. I draw pictures for Papa, but Papa never looks. I try to be very good so Papa will be happy, but Papa never smiles." Dominic stood frozen, the color draining visibly from his face. His men stared at the floor, unable to witness this moment, and even Vince turned away, the hardened man unable to watch his boss be judged by his own child. Lily went on, her voice breaking into sobs. "I miss Mama so much. I miss Mama every day, but Papa never talks about Mama. Papa put all of Mama's pictures away like Mama never existed. I have no one to talk to about Mama. I have no one to hold me when I cry. I am alone, Papa. I am alone in that big house with people I do not know, and I do not understand why Papa does not want to be with me." Then she said the one sentence Dominic would carry with him until his last breath, a sentence that tore his heart into 1,000 pieces. "I think maybe Papa hates me because I look too much like Mama. I think maybe Papa wishes I had gone with Mama so Papa would not have to see my face anymore. So I left. I thought if I was not there, Papa would hurt less." Dominic could no longer stand. His knees gave way, and the most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast of the United States dropped to his knees on the floor of a small-town diner before his 8-year-old daughter. He did not care who was watching, did not care about his image, did not care about anything except the child standing before him with tear-filled eyes. "No," Dominic said, his voice raw as if each word were being torn from deep inside his chest. "No, that is not true. My daughter, that is not true." He looked up at Lily, and for the first time in 3 years, for the first time since Elena died, there were tears in the dark eyes of this man. Papa is sorry. Papa is sorry. His voice trembled. Papa does not hate you. Papa loves you more than anything in this world. You are everything Papa has left of Mama. You are the only reason Papa still wants to live. Papa stayed away not because Papa did not love you, but because Papa did not know how to love you without Mama. Papa was afraid. Papa was afraid to look into your eyes because your eyes look so much like Mama's. Papa was afraid to hold you because Papa was afraid he would cry, and Papa did not want you to see him weak. Papa was afraid to talk about Mama because every time Papa thought of her, his heart felt like it was being ripped apart. But Papa was wrong. Papa was completely wrong. Papa thought he was protecting you, but Papa was hurting you. Papa is sorry. Papa is so sorry, my daughter. Lily stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking at her father kneeling before her. She had never seen Papa like this, had never seen Papa cry, had never heard him speak such words. And in her eyes, fear slowly gave way to something else, a fragile flicker of hope like a candle trembling in the wind. Dominic opened his arms, did not stand, did not step forward, only knelt there with his arms spread in an invitation, a plea, leaving Lily to decide. And after a hesitation that felt endless, she broke away from Sarah, ran forward, and threw herself into her father's arms. Dominic held his daughter as if she might disappear, as if this were a dream he was afraid to wake from. Lily cried, Dominic cried, and all of Rosie's diner fell silent, witnessing the moment a father found his child again, not only in body, but in soul. Sarah stood there with silent tears running down her cheeks, and she knew that whatever came next, whatever price she might have to pay, this moment alone had made everything worth it. A long while later, when the tears had finally eased, and Lily was still curled tightly in her father's arms, Dominic slowly rose, lifting his daughter with him, and she clung to his neck, her head pressed into his shoulder as if afraid that if she let go, he might vanish. And Dominic looked down at her, then lifted his gaze to Sarah, and the look in his eyes was completely different now, no longer cold or threatening, no longer carrying deadly danger, but holding something Sarah had never expected from a man like him: gratitude. He stepped closer, Lily still in his arms, and stopped just a few steps away. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice still deep but no longer sharp. "Sarah Mitchell," she answered, her voice trembling slightly, unsure of what would come next. Dominic nodded slowly, as if carving the name into his memory. "Sarah Mitchell," he repeated. "You did something no one in my world would ever dare to do. You told me to my face what I needed to hear, even knowing I could be dangerous. You took care of my daughter when she needed someone most, and you gave me the chance not to lose her forever." He paused and drew a deep breath. "Thank you." Sarah did not know what to say. She had prepared herself for many things, for threats, for warnings, even for the worst, but not for gratitude from a Mafia boss. "I only did what anyone would do," she said softly. "She needed help." "No," Dominic shook his head. "Not everyone would. Most people would have called the police and forgotten about it. Or worse, they would have looked away and walked past. You did not. You stayed with her, fed her, listened to her, held her when she cried. You did what I, her own father, failed to do for 3 years." He turned to Vince, who had been standing frozen until now, and issued an order in a voice that allowed no refusal. "From now on, she is protected. Assign round-the-clock surveillance. Anyone who touches her, even a single hair, will answer to me. Do you understand?" Vince nodded immediately, pulled a card from his inner pocket, and handed it to Sarah. She took it with shaking hands and looked down at the phone number printed on it. "If you need anything," Dominic said, "anything at all, call that number. Day or night, it does not matter. Vince will handle it." Lily lifted her head from her father's shoulder and looked at Sarah with eyes still red from crying. She reached out her hand, and Sarah stepped closer and took the small hand in hers. "Thank you, Sarah," Lily said in a hoarse voice. "Thank you for not leaving me." Sarah smiled through rising tears, squeezed Lily's hand gently, and told her to be good, to talk to her papa as much as she could, and to remember that she was not alone anymore. Lily nodded, then did something that completely surprised Sarah. She leaned out of her father's arms, wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck, and kissed her cheek. Then father and daughter left, Dominic carrying Lily out the door, his men following behind. Before getting into the car, Dominic turned back and looked at Sarah one last time, giving her a slight nod, a gesture of respect he rarely offered anyone. The line of black SUVs drove away one by one, carrying the two of them into the night, and Rosie's diner slowly returned to its quiet calm. as if a storm had just passed. Sarah stood there, the card still in her hand, watching the headlights fade and disappear. Maggie came up beside her, her face still stunned. "Do you know who that was?" she whispered, as if afraid someone might hear. "Salvatore. Dominic Salvatore. You just saved the daughter of the most notorious mafia boss on the east coast of the United States." Sarah said nothing, only looked down at the card in her hand, and wondered how her life would change from this moment on. That night, Sarah returned to her apartment wrapped in the familiar darkness, the electricity still not restored, feeling her way up the stairs by the weak glow of her phone, and Daniel was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, his face only a vague silhouette in the moonlight slipping through the old curtain. "You are late," he said, his voice carrying a hint of reproach but mostly worry. "I called you several times and you did not answer," and Sarah sat down beside him and began to tell him what had happened. Not everything, but enough for Daniel to understand, and he listened in silence, his eyes widening with every detail, and when she reached the part where Dominic Salvatore appeared, he nearly choked. "Are you insane?" Daniel said when she stopped. "Do you know who that is? Everyone in the city knows the name Salvatore. That is real mafia. Not movies, not stories." You talked back to him. "You are lucky you are still alive sitting here talking to me." And Sarah knew Daniel was right. Yet she also knew she did not regret a single thing. And she thought of the card Vince had given her, still in her pocket, wondering what it truly meant for her life. And that night she could not sleep, lying on the narrow bed, listening to the October wind whistle through the cracks of the window, thinking about Lily, about Dominic, about everything that had happened in a single day that felt as long as a lifetime. And the next morning, when Sarah stepped out of the apartment to head to the diner for her usual morning shift, she sensed something was different. A black sedan was parked at the corner of the street, a man inside reading a newspaper, but his eyes lifted to her the moment she appeared, and as she walked toward the diner, the car rolled slowly after her, keeping a distance just subtle enough not to draw attention, but close enough for her to know they were there. And inside the diner things seemed normal again. Maggie still complained about difficult customers, Mr. Harrison still arrived on time with his morning paper, the Parker kids still spilled milk on the table, yet Sarah noticed a new man sitting in the corner all day, ordering only coffee and occasionally glancing in her direction, and she knew who he was, or rather who he worked for, because the protection Dominic had promised had become real, and in the days that followed strange things began to happen. The landlord called with an oddly careful tone, saying she could be late with the rent for another month. No need to worry, take her time, and when Sarah asked why, he mumbled something and hung up. Then the electricity was restored even though she had not yet gone to pay the overdue bill, and when she called the utility company they told her the balance had been settled, without saying by whom, and Sarah understood what was happening. The invisible hand of Dominic Salvatore was reaching into her life, gently but unmistakably, and she did not know whether to feel grateful or afraid, did not know whether she had stepped into a world she did not belong to and could no longer walk away from. And at night she lay in her apartment, now filled with light, staring at the ceiling, turning Vince's card over and over in her hand, knowing that her life had changed, even if she did not yet know where that change would lead her. 2 weeks passed after the day Dominic and Lily left, and Sarah's life slowly settled back into a familiar rhythm, or at least she tried to convince herself that it had. She was still working at Rosie's diner, still counting every coin to survive, still worrying about the money for Daniel's surgery. The only real difference being that she no longer felt entirely alone. There was always a car parked somewhere nearby, always a man sitting in the corner of the diner nursing coffee all day, the invisible protection of Dominic Salvatore, a silent reminder that she had stepped into a world she did not yet fully understand. Then one Tuesday afternoon, when the diner was quiet and Maggie was on break, a man walked in, and Sarah knew immediately that he was not one of Dominic's people. His suit was expensive but cut differently, his movements confident, yet lacking the disciplined precision she had seen in Vince and his men. He sat directly at the counter across from her, and smiled a smile that never reached his eyes. "Black coffee," he said, his voice mild but sending a chill straight down her spine. Sarah poured the coffee, forcing her hands not to shake. He took a sip, set the cup down, and studied her with an appraising gaze. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, and the fact that he knew her name made her heart stutter. The girl who helped Dominic Salvatore's daughter. "News travels fast in our world." Sarah said nothing, her fingers tightening around the dishcloth, and he continued, his tone still casual, as if discussing the weather. I represent some people who have an interest in the Salvatore family. We would like to know more about them, how they operate, where their weaknesses lie. You have been inside. You met Dominic. You spoke with his daughter. You have information we need." "I do not know anything," Sarah replied, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I only fed a hungry child. That is all." The man chuckled softly, a sound that made her skin crawl. "You are being modest. You made Dominic Salvatore kneel, something no one in history has ever done. You are clearly special, and special people have value." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We know you have a disabled brother who needs surgery. We know you are drowning in debt. We can help. $100,000. All we ask is that you tell us what you know about the Salvatore family, Dominic's schedule, the security layout of the estate, anything you remember." Sarah felt sick. Not with fear, but with disgust. She thought of Lily, of the child's wide eyes, of the hug Lily had given her before leaving. She thought of Dominic kneeling on the diner floor, apologizing to his daughter, of the gratitude in his eyes when he looked at her. They were not good people, she knew that. But they were not her enemies, and no matter how poor she was, no matter how desperate her situation, Sarah was not the kind of person who sold out an 8-year-old child for money. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, her voice colder than she knew it could be. "Please leave the diner." The man looked at her for a long moment, his smile fading into something dark and dangerous. "You are making a mistake," he said, as he stood, leaving a card on the counter. "Dominic Salvatore is not a good man. He will not protect you forever. But we will remember." He left, and the moment the door closed behind him, Sarah rushed into the back room, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the card Vince had given her. She did not know whether she was doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but she knew she needed help, and right now Dominic's people were her only option. Vince answered on the first ring. Sarah spoke quickly, her voice trembling, telling him about the man, about what he had said, about the threat beneath his words. Vince replied with only one sentence, calm and hard as steel. "Do not go anywhere. We are on our way." Less than 10 minutes later, 2 black SUVs stopped in front of the diner. Sarah looked out the window and saw the man being intercepted at the end of the street by Vince's men. She did not know what happened after that, and she did not want to know. All she knew was that when Vince called her back a few minutes later, he spoke only 2 short words. "It is handled. You are safe." Sarah ended the call, sank into a chair in the staff room, and for the first time truly understood that she had stepped into a world with no way back. 3 weeks after the incident with the strange man, Sarah returned to her apartment after an afternoon shift and found an envelope resting in the mailbox, with no return address and no postage, only her name written in careful but slightly crooked childish handwriting, and her heart began to race as she opened it, because what lay inside made her eyes burn with tears. A crayon drawing, simple in the way 8-year-old children draw, yet to Sarah more beautiful than any masterpiece in the world, showing 2 figures holding hands, one tall with brown hair and one very small with long black hair, a bright yellow smiling sun above them, and beneath the picture, a clumsy but loving line of words that read, "Thank you, Sarah. I miss you, Lily." And Sarah sat down on the steps outside her apartment, pressed the drawing to her chest, and cried. She cried from relief, from happiness, from knowing that the small girl was all right, that she still remembered her, that she still had someone to love her. And Daniel wheeled himself out, saw his sister crying, and asked anxiously what was wrong, and Sarah simply handed him the drawing, unable to speak. And inside the envelope there was a second letter, smaller, written in an entirely different hand, strong and decisive, clearly belonging to a man accustomed to giving orders rather than writing from the heart, and Sarah opened it and read, "Miss Mitchell, Lily asks about you every day. She wants to know if Sarah is well, if you are happy, if you miss her. I am not good at this, at writing letters, at saying thank you, but I want you to know that you changed my daughter's life, and mine. We are trying. Every night I read to her. Every morning we have breakfast together. We have talked about Elena, about her mama, and for the first time in 3 years, I can say my wife's name without feeling torn apart from the inside. It is still far from enough, but it is a beginning, because of you. DS." And Sarah read the letter again and again, until she knew every word by heart, and she thought of the terrifying man she had met in the diner, of eyes cold as ice and power that made the world tremble. And then she thought of the father who had knelt on the floor to apologize to his daughter, of the broken voice that told his child he loved her more than anything, and she understood that those two men were one and the same, and that somehow she had touched the human part still alive inside him. And that evening Sarah sat down at the table and wrote a reply, not knowing whether it would arrive or be read, but she wrote anyway. She told them about her life, about small-town Millbrook, about Maggie, who complained endlessly but had a good heart, about Daniel working through physical therapy every day. She asked about Lily, whether she liked her new school, whether she had made friends, whether she still drew pictures, and she placed the letter into the mailbox without a stamp, trusting that Dominic's people would know how to deliver it. And 1 week later a reply came. Lily wrote that Papa had read Cinderella to her the night before, that Papa promised to take her to the zoo on the weekend, that Papa had hung Mama's picture back up in the living room. And at the end of the letter, the girl added one line that made Sarah smile through her tears. Papa says he remembers the way you scolded him. Papa says you are the first person who ever dared to do that. Papa says you are very brave. I think so too. 1 month after that fateful day, Vince appeared at Rosie's diner on a quiet Saturday morning, and Sarah was pouring coffee for Mr. Harrison when she saw him walk in, her heart immediately quickening, because Vince was not someone who came here casually, and his presence usually meant something important. He took a seat at the counter and gave Sarah a respectful nod she was still not used to. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice low and direct as always. "Lily wants to see you." Sarah nearly dropped the coffee cup in her hand, unable to hide her surprise. "Lily wants to see you," Vince repeated. "In fact, she refuses to go to school unless she can see Sarah first. She has mentioned you every single day for the past month, and this morning she declared she would not leave her room until her papa brought Sarah to her." He paused, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly as if suppressing a smile. "My boss is not used to being given conditions, but when it comes to her, there is nothing he can refuse." Sarah glanced toward Maggie behind the kitchen counter, and Maggie nodded, signaling that Sarah should go and that she would handle the diner. Sarah untied her apron, grabbed her bag, and followed Vince outside to the familiar black SUV waiting at the curb. During the drive, Sarah sat quietly, gazing out the window as the scenery shifted from the small streets of Millbrook to the wide highway, then into the suburbs lined with lush green trees. About 45 minutes later, the car turned onto a private road, and Sarah had to stifle a breath when she saw what lay ahead. A tall, wrought-iron gate with intricate patterns slowly opened. Security cameras mounted everywhere, tracking their movement as they passed through. A stone-paved drive led through vast gardens with perfectly trimmed lawns, blooming rose bushes, and ancient oak trees standing solemnly on either side. Then the building came into view, and Sarah could not help but stare. It was not a house, it was a castle. Gray stone, towering windows, imposing columns, marble steps leading up to the main entrance. She had known Dominic was wealthy, but seeing that wealth with her own eyes was an entirely different experience. She felt small and out of place, as though she did not belong here, and she wondered what she was doing in such a place. Then the massive doors flew open, and a small figure burst out like a fired bullet. "Sarah!" Lily shouted, her small legs carrying her down the steps so fast that a guard had to rush after her to make sure she did not fall. Sarah had barely stepped out of the car when Lily crashed into her, wrapping her arms tightly around Sarah's waist as if afraid she might disappear. Sarah dropped to her knees, holding the child close, and realized she was crying. Lily looked completely different from the last time they had seen each other. Her hair was neatly brushed and braided into 2 pretty plaits. Her clothes were clean and lovely, her cheeks rosy and her eyes bright. But what made Sarah happiest was not her appearance, it was her smile. Lily was smiling, the radiant smile of a truly happy child. No trace of the fear and loneliness Sarah had seen behind the trash bins that day. "I missed you so much," Sarah whispered, stroking Lily's hair. "You have grown so much." "I missed you too," Lily said, then tugged Sarah's hand and pulled her to her feet. "Come on. I want to show you my room, my drawings, the teddy bear Papa bought me. Papa buys lots of things, but my favorite is that Papa reads stories to me every night." Sarah let Lily pull her along, up the marble steps and through the enormous doors into the house. She barely had time to notice the luxurious interior, because Lily talked non-stop, dragging her from room to room, proudly showing every toy, every drawing, every little corner she loved. And when Lily stopped in front of a large photograph hanging on the wall, a picture of a beautiful woman with black hair and gentle eyes, she said something that made Sarah's heart melt. "This is Mama. Papa, Put Mama's picture back up. Papa says we will never forget Mama. And whenever I miss Mama, I can talk to her picture. Lily looked up at Sarah, her eyes shining. Because of you, Papa loves me again. Because of you, I have my Papa. After Lily grew tired from running and talking without pause, the nanny gently led her away for an afternoon nap, and although she did not want to leave Sarah, her eyelids were already heavy with sleep, and Sarah stood in the hallway watching Lily's small figure disappear behind the bedroom door, her chest filled with a warmth she could not quite name. And then Vince appeared beside her and gave a brief nod. The boss would like to see you. And Sarah followed him through long corridors with soaring ceilings, past old paintings and carefully arranged fresh flowers, until they stopped before a heavy oak door. Vince knocked, a deep voice answered from inside, and the door opened, and Dominic's study was spacious yet not cold as Sarah had imagined, the late afternoon sunlight spilling through tall windows onto shelves packed with books, onto a dark wooden desk, onto framed family photographs placed with care in one corner, and behind the desk Dominic sat, but he was not the man Sarah had faced in the diner that day. There was no black suit, no icy stare. Instead, he wore a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, his face still sharp and authoritative yet softened, calmer. And when he saw Sarah, he stood, stepped out from behind the desk, and for the first time she saw him smile. Not a cold or mocking smile, but a real one, fleeting yet sincere. "Miss Mitchell," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "please sit." And Sarah sat, placing her hands on her lap to hide her tension. And Dominic chose the chair beside her rather than returning to his desk, as if deliberately closing the distance. "Lily was very happy to see you," he said. "She has talked about you non-stop for the past month. To her, you are a hero." And Sarah shook her head, uncomfortable with the word, saying she was not a hero and had only done what anyone would do. But Dominic replied firmly that not everyone would dare stand before him and speak the truths she had spoken. And he looked straight into her eyes, and Sarah saw there no coldness now, only genuine respect. "You saved my relationship with my daughter," he said. "You gave me a second chance to be a better father. That is not a small thing. That is everything." And he stood, went to his desk, took a thick envelope, returned, and held it out to her, and Sarah looked at it, then at him, and shook her head, saying she could not take his money and had not done any of it for that. And Dominic answered gently that he knew, and that was exactly why he wanted her to accept it, that it was not payment or reward but a gift from him and Lily to the person who had changed their lives, telling her not to open it yet and to open it at home, and asking her not to see it as charity but as respect. And Sarah took the envelope, feeling its weight in her hands and knowing refusal would insult him. She nodded and thanked him softly. And Dominic walked her to the door, adding before she left that if she ever needed anything at any time she should call, that his door would always be open to her. And during the drive back to Millbrook, Sarah held the envelope tightly, not opening it despite her curiosity, waiting until she reached her apartment, until she sat at the small dining table with Daniel across from her, before slowly opening it. And inside was a check, and when Sarah saw the amount she nearly fell from her chair, $250,000. And that was not all. There was a stack of documents, and as she read them, tears began to fall uncontrollably. Confirmation from a hospital in Philadelphia, the best in neurological surgery, stating that a deposit had been made for Daniel Mitchell's operation, that the appointment had been scheduled, that all expenses would be fully covered, and at the bottom of the envelope lay a small note in Dominic's familiar handwriting. "Unconditional kindness deserves unconditional recompense. Do not see this as charity. See it as respect for an extraordinary woman, DS." And Daniel took the papers, read them, and when he looked up at his sister, his eyes were wet. "Sister," he said softly, "at last someone has seen that you deserve something in return." 6 months later, the spring sun shone brightly over the small town of Millbrook, the maple trees along Main Street dressed in tender new green leaves, and the air filled with the sweet scent of blooming apple blossoms. And Sarah Mitchell stood behind the counter of Rosie's diner, no longer the exhausted waitress with dark circles under her eyes and a forced smile she had been 6 months earlier, but now the shift manager, earning a better wage and working only one job, her gray-blue eyes lit with hope, and the smile on her lips, the genuine smile of someone who had rediscovered a reason to live. Her life completely transformed since the day she opened Dominic's envelope. Daniel had undergone a successful surgery at a hospital in Philadelphia with one of the best neurological teams in the country, 6 weeks in the hospital, and 4 months of intensive physical therapy later, he was now able to walk with crutches, legs once thought lost to him forever, slowly regaining strength day by day. Doctors saying that at this pace within a year, he could leave the crutches behind entirely, and every time Sarah watched her brother practice walking in their new apartment, small but warm, with electricity, water, and heat, she had to turn away to hide her tears. She had also returned to school, enrolling in an online evening nursing program, picking up the dream she thought had died 4 years ago, sitting each night after work at her desk with medical textbooks, knowing this time she would not have to give it up. Her mother's medical debt fully paid, her rent arrears gone, and for the first time in her life, Sarah could think about the future without feeling crushed by anxiety. That morning, as she poured coffee for Mr. Harrison as usual, the diner doorbell rang and she looked up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the familiar black SUV outside and then 2 figures walking in, Dominic Salvatore in a dark brown leather jacket holding his daughter's hand, and Lily, now a little taller, her long black hair braided neatly, her eyes lighting up the instant she saw Sarah. "Sarah," Lily shouted, running across the diner straight into Sarah's open arms. And Sarah lifted her, spinning once as they both laughed, setting her down and brushing her hair back. Seeing the difference clearly, this was no longer the frightened child cowering behind trash bins. This was a happy, confident little girl with joy shining in her eyes. Dominic stepped closer and nodded to Sarah with a faint smile, an expression she could not have imagined on that cold face 6 months earlier. "We are on a road trip," he said, his voice warmer than she remembered. "Just the 2 of us, and Lily insisted we stop to see you first. She would not go anywhere else until she did." Sarah watched them, saw the easy affection in the way Dominic rested a hand on Lily's shoulder, the trust and love in the way Lily looked up at her father, and she knew that everything had changed, not only her life but theirs as well. They sat down. Sarah brought pancakes for Lily and coffee for Dominic, and Lily began chattering happily about her new school, her new friends, the puppy Papa had bought her, weekend trips to the park, evenings when Papa read stories and talked about Mama. Sarah listened, smiling, occasionally catching Dominic's gaze resting on her with something deeper than gratitude, something like true respect, and perhaps something warmer she did not dare name. Before leaving, Dominic came closer and spoke softly so only she could hear. "Lily wants you to visit more often." He paused as if weighing his words. "And so do I, if you are willing." Sarah looked into those black eyes no longer cold, looked down at Lily holding her hand tightly, and nodded. Father and daughter left, Lily waving through the car window, Dominic glancing at Sarah in the rearview mirror as the black SUV rolled slowly out of town. And Sarah stood at the diner door watching until it disappeared, feeling something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. 6 months earlier, she had been an exhausted waitress juggling 3 jobs, a disabled brother, crushing debt, and a dead dream. She had nothing but kindness, and she gave that kindness without expecting anything in return. She fed a hungry child, held a frightened little girl, stood up to one of the most dangerous men in America to protect a child not her own, and somehow that kindness returned to her 100-fold. Sometimes the price of kindness is not loss. Sometimes it is receiving more than we ever dared dream. This story reminds us that kindness is never meaningless, no matter how hard your circumstances may be. Sarah had no money, no power, nothing but a loving heart, and that heart changed the life of a lonely child, healed the bond between a father and daughter, and ultimately changed her own life. In the real world, we are not always repaid with checks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but kindness always finds a way back to the giver, in whatever form it chooses: a smile, a thank you, a connection, or simply the peace of knowing you did the right thing. Dear friends, the story ends here, but its message lives on. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness change someone's life? Please share with us in the comments below. We would love to hear the stories and emotions from your hearts. If you enjoyed this story, do not forget to like, share it with those you care about, and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the moving stories we bring you every day. We wish all of you watching good health and a life filled with joy and peace each day. Remember that kindness is the most precious thing you can give, and it will always find its way back to you. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.